not. I am Councilmember Burns, Mayor Pro Tem for the evening. We will roll call in for the record.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Harris. Present. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nusma.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Heracariz.
Here.
All right, there are no Mayor Pro Tem public announcements and proclamations, so we move forward to City Manager public announcements.
Good evening, members of the council, Chair Burns, Clerk Mendoza. I'd like to ask Mr. Cummings to come up to the podium here. I would like to ask everyone to please join me in congratulating Mr. Cummings on his new prestigious career opportunity. In mid-August, Nick will take over as General Counsel of the Chicago Park District. I'd like to thank Nick for his service to Evanston, including his outstanding work on reparations, which is often used as a potential blueprint for many municipalities nationwide. Nick also played a key role in helping the city navigate the COVID pandemic and changes in leadership. We wish Nick the best of luck in his new role at Chicago Park District.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke, and thank you all very much. It's been an honor to serve the city of Evanston for the last 3 years. I had an opportunity to learn a lot, and I hope that I will be able to take what I've learned here and continue on in my career. It's kind of weird this being my last city council meeting, but I am ever grateful for the opportunity that was given to me to have this position. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And I just wanted to add, Deputy City Attorney Alex Ruggie will assume the interim Corporation Counsel position with Nick's departure. Thank you to Alex for stepping up into this role. We will be externally posting the Corporation Counsel position in August. Thank you.
Nick.
Councilmember Reed.
I just also want to thank you for your service. I would say that there's almost no one in this building that has forced me to learn more and to sharpen my skills than you, and so I appreciate the exchanges that we've had and the learning that has come from that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have communications from our city clerk.
I did also want to thank Nick for definitely when I started my role here at the city, he was instrumental in making sure that we were compliant and we had good onboarding in my office. I do want to acknowledge public comment from Evie Russell opposed to P1, and Mary Cavalier, who's not a Northwestern Evanston resident, but wants to ensure that the council looks into the hurt traffic concerns regarding the Northwestern campus. Thank you.
Next up, we have public comment. Everyone will have 3 minutes to make their comment, starting with Jack Mortel. Huddled up at the moment. Jack Mortel. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jack Mortel, an Evanstonian for 7 decades, Evanston homeowner since the 70s, retired captain of the Evanston Fire Department, and newly elected president of the Evanston Firefighters Pension Board. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. I'm here tonight to thank the entire Evanston Budget and Finance Committee for the hard work that was put into Resolution 45-R-23, adopting the pension fund policy for Evanston's public safety pension plans. It is on tonight's consent agenda. This was hammered out over a 6-month period at the regular meetings of Evanston's Budget and Finance Committee. The committee consists of 5 Evanston council members and 3 Evanston citizens with background and expertise in this area. This was approved 8-0 at the Budget and Finance Committee level. A number of historical factors have resulted in Evanston having this huge, unfunded, actuarial accrued liability with its public safety pension funds. I'm not here to rehash how that occurred. I'd rather talk about the solution. Prior Evanston councils, mayors, finance directors were never successful with solving the problem of this huge tax burden borne by Evanstonians, and just kept growing and growing and getting worse every year. Approving 45-R-23 will be historic, and perhaps a blueprint for other pension funds. Again, after 6 intense months, Evanston Budget and Finance Committee has arrived at the solution to not only 100% fully fund Evanston's public safety pensions by 2040, resulting in long-term tax savings for the citizens here, and also strengthening and bolstering Evanston's bond rating. The city should never again suffer a reduction in our bond rating due to this huge pension debt hanging over the city of Evanston without a clear solution in sight or even contemplated. This bond rating reduction actually did happen in the past. I urge the council to approve as presented Resolution 45-R-23, adopting the pension fund policy for Evanston's public safety pension plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Rodney Green.
Good evening, City Clerk, council members, City Manager. I'm Rodney Green, and I've been a resident of Evanston since 1988, former City Clerk, and I'm here to talk about the proposed discussion today about the toxic of items that was in our drinking water. We always say our drinking water is the best and cleanest water here in the state. And I'm wondering if this is still going along with the drinking water that we talked about 10 years ago, where it said that our water was purified and was pretty good to drink. We sell it to our neighboring entities, and the water is good, but we seem to have problem drinking water here in Evanston. We have to put water filtrations on our drinking water at home. We get brown water coming out in our tub water and also in some of our drinking water. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on with making sure that these contaminants that we're going through talk about now, which is now been raised to a 4 instead of a 2.0 contaminants, that is now going to be a double that amount. The second thing I want to talk about is whether or not the council members are going to the Northwest Municipal Conference, because if not, then I would say that we should not pay for those fees unless all council members are attending. I know in the past they have not attended, and I just want to make sure the funds are spent in the right and proper way. So I know you don't have to speak back to me, but those are two things I want to bring before the council today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have, I believe, Dave Ellis.
Dave Ellis, lifelong resident, and I'd like to thank you for letting me speak. I'd like to speak as well to Resolution 45-R23. I was at the Finance and Budget Committee meetings. I want to applaud that committee for taking on the work that's been ongoing for the last 4 decades. The Blue Ribbon Committee that was started back in 2008 made the suggestions of the path to set to get to where we need to be. This committee took on the serious work of looking at the liabilities that the city had and coming up with a plan to try to address this. The underfunded liability is the largest liability the city of Evanston faces. By following and adopting this funding policy, policy, it has the potential of saving in excess of $500 million to the taxpayers, as opposed to not doing anything or businesses we've done in the past. This is, as Jack has said, this is a historic position. It's the right thing to do. It's going to help the city's bond ratings in the future. It's going to help running the city more effectively and transparently. It will not be crisis management. I really applaud the Finance and Budget Committee, and I certainly encourage the council to vote for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Timothy Schoolmaster.
Good evening, City Manager Stowe, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. The previous speakers on this have pretty much said everything I wanted to say on this, but this indeed, if passed, will be an historic moment. You should be congratulated, and especially members of the Budget and Finance Committee, Council members Kelly, Nusma, Wynn, Burns, Reed, and the other members. Indeed, an historic occasion. This quest started with my fellow pension fund colleague, Lieutenant Robert Haytow, in 1984. Robert died of a heart attack on the job on November 10th, 2000, so he was not able to see this. I carry his nameplate in my pocket most days. He will see it. Alderman Jack Korshak, a retired banker, when we had 18 aldermen, he supported us. Mayoral appointee Jerry Graff, who was a CPA who met with city powers that be, and after studying this for a week, told them if my clients were doing this, they'd be in jail. Mayoral appointee trustee Mark Weisberg, an ERISA partner at a major Chicago law firm, had the same observation. Somehow it got ignored, and I'm delighted and happy and thankful that all of you have seized this opportunity, seen through the stuff. It's not going to be easy. This is not going to be an easy thing to do. It's going to cause a little bit of pain, but thank you also to my colleagues in the Fire Pension Fund, especially newly elected president of the fund, Jack Mortel, and to the entire council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ray Friedman.
Good evening, everyone. I recently listened to the city, the State of the City address by Mayor Biss, which I agreed with for the most part. What's the meaning of life? To see art, beauty, solve problems, be with people, be happy, build relationships. But he really talked about people being angry and wondering why. Sorry, I got to look at my phone because my computer froze. Recently, we heard about Pat Fitzgerald being suspended for 2 weeks. Then 2 days later, he was fired. Then a few days later, the baseball coach was fired. A few years ago, we had an issue with sexual harassment on the lakefront, with over 50 young ladies signing a complaint. It took over 1 year, and we spent a lot of money for you all to investigate that claim, and to my knowledge, no one got fired. We just paid a lot of people to resign. I wonder how much that cost. Oh yes, you did fire one person that had nothing to do with the lakefront. He was liked, and the previous mayor pleaded with you to keep him, Kevin Brown, and you wonder why people are angry, really. We have been asking when we will have the dialogue which is intended by these public comments. What is your response to that request? Instead of building relationships, as you spoke of, Mayor Biss I was addressing, you're shutting down public comment, only allowing 2 minutes at Rules Committee instead of 3, I don't know why. 20 minutes total, I don't know why. No feedback from our comments. Yes, this is very frustrating and does not address the purpose for which this public comment was designed. Take a look at today's Chicago Tribune. It's about a 3-page article. Evanston residents angry about illegal move by city to bypass public discussion on Northwestern Stadium project. Yes, residents are angry. You need to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori McFarland.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to talk on item P1. I've written most of you today, so you may have heard some of my comments before. There is a portion of this Omnibus text amendment package that is really very detrimental to the public process of the Land Use Commission. It proposes to change the wording of Land Use Commission requests for continuances by objectors to various Land Use Commission proposals from the current wording, which says that objectors shall be granted one continuance, typically to the following meeting 2 weeks later. So not a big continuance, in order to present additional evidence, and evidence in opposition to that filed by the applicant. This is one of the few opportunities that objectors actually have to present evidence. Councilmember Newsma, I got your response, and I appreciated seeing that to my letter. You mentioned that there are many opportunities for public comment, and that is true. But what the Land Use Commission offers is not just public comment, but the actual opportunity to present evidence. And it is much more challenging to try to present evidence at any of the other stages, such as P&D or council. Those bodies are not really meant for that. The Land Use Commission is where the fact gathering is supposed to happen. And this is therefore the only opportunity that opponents have to present that contrary evidence that seeks to dispute something. You know, every developer who comes before the Land Use Commission has a very rosy view of their own development. And so it is not uncommon that there might be contrary facts that the developer has not presented to the Land Use Commission. This is the opportunity for the Land Use Commission to actually hear those contrary facts and take those into account. So I ask you to do one of two things today. And I beg my pardon, I arrived apparently after you all started. So if you are hearing this item tonight and it is not being held over, then I ask you to strike sections 13, 14, and 15 from the proposed amendment. Those solely have to do with the changing the wording of this Land Use Commission procedure. If the Land Use Commission wants to do those at a later point, they can bring them up at a different time. And I make that offer because I understand that there are other parts of this omnibus package that the Land Use Commission very much wants to have passed tonight. So I'm not trying to get in anybody's way or create a burden for the Land Use Commission. I think that this particular provision needs more thought. And so I would prefer that it either be stricken, those sections, or that you vote to hold it over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Christian Knapp. Who's that? Mary Rosinski.
Hi, thank you very much. And I just want to say I agree wholeheartedly with what Mrs. McFarland just said, or Laura said. She's an experienced attorney and she's so level-headed. And I think one thing, as Ray pointed out, I agree with everything Ray said, so I won't repeat it, but that people do, if you're wondering why people are feeling angry, it's because they've been cut out and they've been told everything's fine, and then it's not. And to Lori's point, we only get so little time. And most of the city council meetings, there is no time. You keep cutting it back, in spite of the fact that when Mayor Haggerty was in charge and rules was there, he said there's plenty of time to talk and discuss at committee. And now that's been brought down to 2 minutes. And some ward meetings are so jam-packed that there is no public discussion. And then there's no agenda items for things that are community-wide. So if you really want to be the Evanston that we say we're going to be, we need to listen to what Lori said, give people the right, this is our city. And I want to know who authorized Nick Cummings, our chief counsel, to file a motion for that, to modify the 20-year-old or 19-year-old's court decree to have Northwestern and the city meet 4 times a year. without telling anyone on the committee. And we've got an attorney, you've got Claire Kelly, you've got Julie Jensen, who are all wonderful representatives. And then Northwestern just doesn't show up. And then the next month, it turns out our council, we find out, has filed a motion in May, a month before the meeting, that Northwestern didn't show up, to take the T1 district, which happens to be the area over by Northwestern, out of the discussion. So, it's not looking good. It looks like a lot of special interest have the privilege of talking to staff and getting things on the agenda, and other people, ordinary citizens, don't. So I hope you take that. I hope you take all the public comment and to heart, and especially listen to Ms. McFarland about 13, 14, and 15, because that's really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mike Vasilko.
Thank you. Mary was being kind. I can't applaud, as you all did, the Corporation Council. Rather, I'm asking the City Council members to authorize an independent investigation into the appearance of the Corporation Council collaboration with Northwestern University regarding the Ryan Field matter and the adjacent parking lot. Today's Tribune article brings that to light. So let's pull back the curtain. What's really happening here is there is effectively a conspiracy within Evanston city government and the Corporation Council's office, and taking place with the knowledge of at least some of the council who favor the Ryan Field development before the Land Use Commission or the Planning and Development Committee even start their reviews. No other conclusion can be drawn. Why is the City Corporation's Council intervening on Northwestern's behalf in the courts? This action was kept secret. Who on the council was aware of the legal filing that took place in May, 3 months ago? An independent investigation would find out which government officials knew about the Cummings action and when. There was a Northwestern City meeting, one of the 4 annual meetings that was supposed to take place on June 14th. The room was packed. We learned at that meeting that Northwestern officials were not in attendance, were not going to be in attendance, that Dave Davis was in Jamaica. Davis didn't bother to tell the committee in advance. Davis's office didn't bother to tell the committee in advance. No one was sent to the meeting, and in the absence of Dave Davis, so 50 more people attended that meeting with the expectation that they would be able to ask questions and get answers that night. Some would say Northwestern intentionally committed fraud. That night, committee members said they were going to reschedule the meeting. Claire Kelly, the chair, made attempts to do so. Now, 6 weeks ago, from June 14th, and 2 weeks before the August 9th Land Use Committee meeting, Northwestern is just simply running out the clock, thumbing their noses, and it appears they are doing so with the assistance of the City of Evanston's Corporation Council. I'd really like Cummings to address this tonight at the pleasure, of course, of the Mayor Burns sitting in for the mayor. So please ask him to do that. That's not a rhetorical question. At the recent July 6th 8-ward meeting, Corporation Council reinforced Northwestern's unsubstantiated premise that Evanston would benefit, from increased fees and taxes and revenue.
Mr. Vasilko, if you can bring your comments to a close, please.
I will. Since when is it the job description of the Corporation Council to advocate for Northwestern at ward meetings? And where is the city taxpayer finance economic impact study? That document will probably arrive, the way things are going, on August 8th, on the eve of the LUC. It's no wonder Northwestern is a field of scandals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in person or online that would like to make a public comment?
Yes.
Evie Russell.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I sent an email to all of you. I don't know if you've received it regarding the PI ordinance. And I agree with Laurie McFarlane and of course also with Mike Vasilico and Ray Freeman. But with Laurie McFarlane and Mary Rosinski regarding continuance language, requests for continuance should be granted promptly when they comply with regulations. Considering the difficulties that residents already have had in the past, which I delineated in my emails to you all, in achieving a legal and rightful continuance, the wording in Luke should be amended to shall be, as it is worded in the zoning ordinance, not the other way around. Luke is a non-elected body and should not determine the ultimate fate of the vital democratic tool, the continuance. The language should not be changed to may be. The words may be are open to prejudicial interpretation vis-à-vis genuine, legally entitled continuance requests. Non-elected committee members or even elected officials are not royalty, and residents are not the subjects or their peons. Yes, the latter do represent us, but in a democracy, residents should be entitled to fair hearings and certainly to correct information and to an advance information of any new detail in proposed changing to the zoning code. Thus, the residents can prepare their arguments in favor of or against such changes and be able to submit such arguments either in writing in a timely manner or speak on the chamber's floor in a cogent manner as relating specifically to the changes. You often tell us that you want to hear from us, and we do believe you, and we want to be able to communicate our concerns to you with all facts in place. Therefore, the need to allow continuances when necessary for the purpose of having the right information. To institute a change now to maybe, just before NU is going to come before Luke with a current new stadium zoning change proposal, is unfortunately very suspicious, particularly in view of the staff proposal discussed at the recent Rules Committee to eliminate the P&D step between Luke and City Council. It's very likely that NU again will present, as it has repeatedly done in the past, brand new modifications or information at city committees without giving proper notification and information of those changes in a legally required time and manner to the residents who would be most affected by those changes. Residents should keep their legal rights for continuance, if they so request one, without the need to cross more hurdles, just as residents have a right to P&D discussions after Luke's favorable or modified recommendations, and also keep the right that a zoning proposal which has been denied by P&D should not continue on to council. So I am concerned about the seemingly concerted effort to stifle our voices and to help Northwestern in their ill-conceived zoning proposal changes.
If you can,
Thank you.
I think you already have. Is that all, Ms. Russell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will go to the consent agenda. Would anybody like to remove any items off the consent agenda?
I would like to remove item FB1.
P1, please.
Councilmember Reed, can you say that one more time? You said FB1?
FB1, yep.
Okay, so we have FB1. Councilmember Sufferton.
P1.
P1.
A12, 17, and 22.
A2?
I don't know how Mayor Bitch does this. Hold on. A2, are you taking them down?
A2, 12, 17, and 22.
Y'all just firing them. All right, what you got? Anything else? All right, so I have A2, I have A12, A17, A22, P1, and FB1. Is that right? Anything else? Okay, if I can have a motion to approve.
I'll move the consent agenda minus items A7, minus items A12, A17, A22, and P1 and FB1.
And A2.
And A2.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right. Next up, we will have approval of the minutes of the regular city
That was
council
approved in
meeting of
consent.
July 10th. Oh, is that on consent? Okay. So we're good. So we'll start off with A2.
I'll move item A2, approval of a contract award with CDM Smith Incorporated for fiscal years 2023, 2024, and 2025 for PFAS treatment technique study services.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. And now for discussion. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. I'm, of course, very glad that we're going to be addressing the PFAS issue. I just wanted to get more clarity on the deliverables. This is I think it's like $1.5 million. Thank you.
No problem.
Darrell King.
Yes, Chair Burns, members of City Council, Darrell King, Water Production Bureau Chief. So included in the study is a total of 14 tasks, 8 of which are included in the base scope of work. And so the first task and the largest portion of the study will consist of bench scale and pilot testing of 5 treatment techniques: powdered activated carbon, granular activated carbon, ion exchange, nanofiltration, and reverse osmosis. And so the bench scale testing will determine, which media, resins, and so forth will work the best. From there, it'll go into a pilot testing. So those bench scale testing, that's 2 to 4 months. The pilot testing is at the treatment plant for 12 months. At the end of it all, what the city will get will be knowledge of which treatment technique or techniques are implementable at scale at the water treatment plant, at Evanston's water treatment plant. That will include, feasibility, conceptual designs, probable construction costs, implementation schedules, life cycle costs. And so that's the bulk of the 8 tasks. And there'll also be meetings and technical memorandums along the way. And the optional tasks, the remaining of the 14 tasks of the, 8 of the base, and then the remaining 14 will consist of, some risk communication, and that'll be assistance with, outreach. We think, with PFAS, the way it's in the news, we think it's important to communicate properly to the public what we're doing, what PFAS is, what are the impacts of PFAS, what are Evanston doing in order to address it, and just communicate that to the public effectively throughout the process. So that's one optional task. Membrane pilot testing, so we're gonna do bench scale testing of nanofiltration and reverse osmosis. We also thought it would be advantageous for us to also pilot test that technique. That wasn't included in the base scope of work. So we thought it would be advantageous to do that as well. There are also novel absorbents that we want to consider outside of ion exchange, granular activated carbon. We want to also test out novel absorbents. That'll be for a year as well. Some additional PFAS sampling. There are some potential legislation on regulating additional PFAS chemicals. We also want to get ahead of that and perform some sampling and some testing on that as well. And finally, membrane concentrate testing. So when you treat PFAS, it concentrates. And there could be, we may not be able to just, with certain techniques, to put it in the sewer for disposal for MWRD to treat. If regulations came about and we weren't able to do that, we also would like to test how do we treat the concentrate that could potentially be created at the plant. So that'll be another pilot testing that'll also occur as part of the project.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, moving on to
I will
item
move item
A12.
A12, which is approval of contract award to Arthur J. Gallagher and Company for insurance broker services. This is RFQ 2535.
Is there a second? A12 has been properly moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. Any comments, questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. All right, that is approved. Moving forward to item
I will
A17.
Move item A17, Resolution 46R23, authorizing the creation of a short-term task force to investigate and report on the economic security of local families.
All right, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Harris.
Herrick Harris. Oh, I didn't, I'm sorry, I heard it was next.
Any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
I'm happy to respond to, whoever, to Councilmember Newsom, this was pulled off, but to give a brief overview, this is a task force that I've spoken to the mayor about, Clerk Mendoza, some of my colleagues here on council, Councilmember Kelly, Hedicades, and Burns, to look into a number of issues that have great promise for increasing the economic security of local families. One being looking into a baby bonds initiative, another being looking into check cashing at the city clerk's office, and then lastly, looking into expanding our municipal child care options. We are, proudly, but I don't think we really recognize this, we are one of the few communities that offers a municipal subsidized child care program through Robert Crown. And I think we need to get a greater understanding of that and determine how we can better bolster that to make Evanston a more livable community. And so this task force will come back by October 9th with a report on potential recommendations to pursue these policies.
You good? All right, all those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, any abstentions? All right, that is approved. Moving forward to
That brings us, oh, sorry.
item A22.
I will move item A22 ordinance. I will move that we table until our second meeting in September, ordinance 108-022, amending City Code Section 10-11-13, Schedule 13.
A22 has been properly moved by Councilmember Reed for a table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been seconded by Councilmember Hedicades. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, item A22 is approved. P1? Councilmember Reed, you've carried us this far.
I'll move it for us. I will move ordinance, item P1, ordinance 68023 and 69023, amending Title VI of the City Code with an omnibus text amendment package to provide clarification and updates to the zoning ordinance.
All right, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Harris. First up, we have Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think that the objections that were raised by the emails that we've received and tonight by Mrs. McFarland with respect to legal objectors, changing the language of whether a legal objector may have continuation to the word shall, no, excuse me, changing it from shall to may, I don't think is a wise idea. Long before I was ever on the council, I was one of those legal objectors who was a regular citizen who didn't have enough time to prepare for a plan commission meeting, and was able to avail myself, along with my neighbors, of getting an extension. And that's frequently the case why neighbors come forward, legal objectors come forward and ask for a continuance, because as Ms. McFarland said, developers have their materials all carefully prepared and nicely packaged, and they've had months to prepare, whereas frequently the neighbors really have a very short time. So I don't have this written up yet, but I suggest that, and I will write it up, I suggest that may in subsections 13, 14, and 15 not be changed. No, I suggest that the language of shall remain, and that we not change sections 13, 14, and 15, the word may. And I will write something.
Okay. Councilmember Nguyen is going to write that up. In the meantime, we will continue through the list. Councilmember Newsmill, you're next up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. To that point, I want to note that City Council Rule 6.2 does allow community objectors the right to present their side of the story at planning and development. If you give me a second, I can pull up the exact language here. You don't need to listen to me think, but objectors do have 10 minutes to present their side of the story at P&D, which is the next step after land use, and then it goes to council. So there are adequate opportunities for public engagement here. But I'm sympathetic to Councilmember Nguyen's take on the topic here, given her graybeard status on the council. And I also want to ask about our TOD designation, and we made an amendment last time. And if staff is available to speak to that point regarding the actual impact of making that change, whether or not, what kind of impact that would have, and what does a TOD designation actually imply?
Good evening, City Council. Melissa Klotz, Zoning Administrator. So the TOD change that was proposed from the last meeting was to increase that boundary to within half a mile of any train station. So you can see the map in the packet. It does expand the area quite a bit to cover a significant portion of the city. The map is a little bit misleading when you compare it to our regulations. Our current TOD regulations reduce parking for multifamily residential only. So any parcel that has a single family home, 2 flat on it, there is no change. It doesn't matter if they're in TOD or out, there are no implications. So while many more parcels are now being included, most of those parcels will not see a change in any kind of regulation. One clarification regarding the continuance request. Just to clarify, we are proposing that continuances can still definitely occur. It's that when they are requested, they would need to have a reason requested with them, and then the Land Use Commission would grant those continuances. So if there isn't a legitimate reason provided, then they don't have to grant the continuance. That is the current practice, and it is what has been going on for at least a decade. We just found that we had an inconsistency in our language that we needed to adjust.
So are there any, back to the TOD question, is there anything else besides parking that a TOD designation changes?
Not within the zoning ordinance. There are some, I take that back, zoning bonuses that are related to inclusionary housing. Those are affected with it, and in some instances it actually increases the parking requirement, which is something that we are looking to update with our next IHO update. But Anything that is outside of the IHO and zoning bonuses that go with that, then it would not impact that.
Okay. So we've made the change from quarter mile, eighth mile, whatever, to half a mile. Doesn't really have that much, if any, practical impact.
Correct. Very few properties would be impacted by it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Yeah, I plan to make a motion to hold this, but before I do, is there any piece of this that is particularly time sensitive? The sign code?
There are a couple that are very time sensitive. Everything related to the sign code, there are multiple businesses waiting to apply for very necessary signage, so I would ask that you please try to move that forward. But there are a number of other things that are in the works that people are waiting on as well. So I would request that anything problematic, if you would pull that out and let everything else continue on.
Okay. All right, well, for me, it's the land use piece and the TOD piece. I don't know where other people are, but I don't want to slow down businesses that are looking to get signs from getting their signs. So I don't know where everybody else is, but I don't want to hold it just to hold it. But the TOD piece, I think, needs a little bit more study, and then the Land Use Commission concerns that were expressed, I think, are valid. I just want to throw it out there that I'm prepared to make a motion to hold, and I don't want to ruin your life, but I think that there's some work to be done, and that's not an indictment of your efforts thus far.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I think the explanation around the Land Use Commission shall make sense if the goal is to ensure that we are effectively using the process, and that potentially, neighbors or developers, whoever, can't just, without good cause, hold up the process and say, I want a continuance, I want a continuance. I think this makes perfect sense, and I think we should move forward with it. It's a solid explanation. And then secondly, to the TOD area, I want to say, sure, the number of parcels within a half mile of a train station, there are plenty of parcels that today may, be zoned R4 or something else, or R1, but tomorrow could have different zoning classifications, as well as what's really important is, and Councilmember Newsom, this is for you. I really want you to hear this. I want both of you to hear this, but specifically with the TOD area, one of the greatest costs of building housing, and particularly affordable housing, is parking. And we know that for each parking stall, if we're talking about an actual covered garage, that's $35,000 minimum per stall. And if we're talking a surface lot, it's quite a bit lower. It's between $15,000 to $20,000, around $15,000. And so this is a substantial cost and barrier to creating affordable housing in our community. And so extending this out has real-world practical impacts and helps support our CARP goals and other goals. And I also want to be clear, there are, the bonuses that come with being in a TOD area to build additional housing. Is someone prepared to talk a bit more about that?
Thinking of the
Floor
zoning
area
bonuses,
ratio? Yeah.
off the top of my head, they generally increase density, increase the number of allowed market rate units, which still then have to have parking, while the actual inclusionary units do not have to have parking. So that's part of the reduction there. And then there's usually a little bit of a bump for FAR and height as well.
Which makes the overall project more affordable, thereby essentially helping to subsidize the affordable housing. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind. And so I hope that we can, I don't think that this is something staff supports, the half-mile radius, and you stand by it. I don't know what more study we need our staff to do. Our staff is saying that they feel comfortable moving forward with this. and are recommending it. So I think the study has been done by the experts. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Yeah, I also have concerns as expressed by Councilmember Nguyen. I think with regard to continuances in the Land Use Commission, I think we don't want to restrict or disenfranchise residents in any regard. I think Councilmember Nguyen articulated very clearly the issues involved with leaving that in a more arbitrary state, whether or not a resident may be granted a continuance. So I also don't want to see that language change, and I also would like to see more detailed analysis in a written form with regard to the TODs in terms of what that means with regard to height and other issues that might come up as a result. So I also concur with both Councilmembers Suffredin and Nguyen. Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma.
To address Councilmember Suffredin's question, I'm okay with the TOD as it is now. If we want to take a little bit more time on the land use rules, I'd be cool with that.
Councilmember Suffredin, you are next, but I think it'll be helpful, might be helpful for you to know. So I would also like to amend this. So as Mayor Pro Tem, I believe I'm still allowed to vote. I would not necessarily maybe amend it, but I'd like to remove TOD. This is just, it falls within, it includes Jackson and Emerson, which is a site that you all know the city now owns, and eventually we're going to develop likely a multi-unit development there. And because of that, because that's one of the potential developments, a few neighbors have reached out hoping to get more information about this, which we've just now gotten in this meeting. So I wouldn't be able to vote for it today unless we, remove that from it. I'd like to give them some time to review the information, to talk to them, and then I'll come back and be prepared to vote. Councilmember Suffredin.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is figure out a way to do the sign piece. I mean, obviously it's within my rights to make a motion to hold, and if it's seconded, then that we didn't get anything done on this. But the sign piece sounds like it's non-controversial, and there are businesses waiting on it. The other things, like, just need a little bit more examination and could be brought up at our next meeting. So, I mean, I don't know where everybody is. I don't like just holding stuff to hold stuff, but.
If I could, there are some businesses waiting on some of the other pieces. For instance, the mixed-use market, Foxtrot is coming to Evanston and is waiting on that one in order to get zoning approved. So I would request if you could just pull out the ones that you're not comfortable with at this point and move everything else forward.
Okay. Well, the land use piece for sure, the TOD piece, and for sure. And then is there any other things that other people want to pull out? Because, I mean, otherwise, obviously, like, again, I can make a motion to hold it, and we didn't do anything, but we held it. So is there anything else that people want to pull out and to work on going forward?
I don't think so. I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay. Is that good? All right. So in that case, I'd like to, I guess I got to write this down. I'd like to, but I'll put it in writing, but I'd like to move that we pull out the pieces related to Land Use Commission and TOD boundaries.
All right, we have a motion on the table.
I'll second.
A second? It's been properly moved by Councilmember Suffredin and seconded by Councilmember Kelly. We'll open it up for discussion while it's being reduced to writing. Councilmember Hadakatis, I know your light was on.
Yeah, I had a question for Council Cummings about how we pull them out in an amendment, so, but we're doing that, so.
You good? Okay. Councilmember Reed.
Yes. If we have questions about the land use process, I think we should pull that out. I would urge us not to pull out the TOD area. All of us have residents who have things that they are not fully aware of. And I think to hold off on making tangible progress here, because a few residents, haven't done a Google search about TOD areas, isn't appropriate. And also, affordable housing is one of our, soon to be one of our goals for the last, year and a half of our term. And when we have policies like parking minimums that are not based on anything scientific, that are akin to kabuki science, there's no reason why we couldn't move forward with expanding the TOD area, where essentially the main impact is reducing parking minimums for affordable units, which makes the project more affordable, and giving small bonuses that incentivize the creation of affordable housing through floor area ratio and other bonuses. If we can't wrap our heads around this and we can't move forward with something as simple as this, I fear that we, again, should maybe not look at affordable housing as being one of our top priorities, because this is low-hanging fruit and makes a tangible difference out there in the development of affordable units. If we can't do this is concerning, and the information that we need is in front of us. Our staff is supportive of this, and this is a well-researched piece of policy that many other communities are, one, either eliminating parking minimums because they understand their uselessness, and many other communities are moving toward expanding their TOD areas to encourage affordable housing and less car-centric housing in proximity to public transit. And so I ask us to move forward with TOD, and if we have questions about the Land Use Commission process, to hold that. So I would move to amend Councilmember Suffredin's amendment and include TOD, or maybe there'd be a friendly amendment from Councilmember Suffredin to re-include TOD. I guess there's no friendly amendment, so I will move that we reinsert the TOD amendments.
That motion, I believe, is in order, so we have a motion. Is there a second? There's no second, so we're back where we started. Councilmember Nusma, do you have any?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm with Councilmember Reed on the merits of the TOD. And in fact, staff has said the practical implications of making that change are somewhat negligible. I'm okay with holding it to allow everyone else to kind of catch up with the thought, and fully intend on voting for that when it does come back in front of us. So I'll be supportive of the hold. Or the, not the hold, but the amended, of Councilmember Suffredin's amendment, I should say.
Point of order, what are we asking staff to bring back to us? I don't know if that was clear. And we're just putting more work on staff for what? What are we asking staff to bring back?
Councilmember Suffredin.
I move that we hold this until our next meeting.
Second.
So you're withdrawing the whole thing? Okay.
Hold the whole thing.
So I believe Councilmember Suffredin is withdrawing the first motion and is now saying we should hold it. So
I move to override the hold.
I don't even know if it's been seconded yet.
It has by Councilmember Kelly.
Was it seconded? The hold was seconded? Okay.
Yes.
So the hold was seconded by, moved by Councilmember Suffredin, seconded by Councilmember Kelly, and
If I'm recognized, Chair.
you are recognized.
I move to override the hold. We have, it's clear that we can't do this, so.
Council Cummings, help me out. So just
So
call a vote on this, on the override?
requires a second, and then there's a roll call vote.
All right, so is there a second for the override?
I'll second. I'm
It's
with Councilmember Suffredin. Let's get done tonight what we're ready to do.
Okay, so it's been seconded by Councilmember Nusma, the override, and now let's do roll call.
Councilmember Kelly,
This is on the override, correct?
This is on the override, yes.
No.
Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Nguyen. Yes. Councilmember Nusma,
Yes.
Councilmember Burns,
Yes.
Councilmember Suffredin.
No.
Councilmember Reed,
Yes.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Yes.
Okay, do we do we have any amendments? think
I
we're
will,
back to-
yes, I will move that we remove the Land Use Commission process from the from the package.
I think he withdrew it.
No, that, he removed his motion. He withdrew it by
So
moving
somebody
the whole-
else can make it if you want.
So I'm now making a new motion.
Can you restate that motion? I'm sorry.
I move that we, I'm sorry, just a point of order. Did we vote on Councilmember Nguyen's motion? I would actually like to deal with Councilmember Nguyen's.
No, I don't believe that was moved.
Oh, you moved,
Yeah.
okay, I saw an email come in.
The
Okay.
email came in, but it wasn't moved.
Were
So
you
you're gonna
planning
make
on
a-
moving that?
Councilman Reed, are you going to make a motion?
I was getting a point of order to make sure I was understanding where we were. Yes, I will move that we remove the Land Use Commission process that was previously referred to from the Omnibus package.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, there's no second.
Okay.
Do we have another motion? Councilmember Kelly, I know your light's on, so
I'm
You
sorry,
good?
I was going to reintroduce Councilmember Suffredin's motion.
do you want to do that?
I'd like to reintroduce Councilmember Suffredin's original motion to remove both of those items, the continuance item with regard to the Land Use Commission and the TOD expansion to a half a mile.
All right, that motion has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Harris. Any
Mis-
further? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification of the record, the sections, the ordinance that Councilmember Nguyen pointed out, 13, 14, and 15, I believe are what deal with the Land Use Commission process, so that everybody understands what they're voting on. And the TOD area is just the definition section that's being amended, the definition of TOD area, and I'm trying to find that section. I just had it, I'm sorry. It's in section 12, 6-19-3 definitions. So I just want to make sure the record was clear of what we're amending.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
I call for a roll. I'm sorry.
Roll call.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris. Aye. Councilmember Nguyen. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Now, item, is it P1 as amended? Do we want to do a roll call? We'll do roll call again. I think you want to do.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin.
No.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
All right, P1 passes. We're on to FB1. Can somebody move FB1, please?
I will
Mr. Chair,
move
I'll move item, go ahead.
I'll move item FB1, Resolution 45R23, adopting the pension funding policy for public safety pension plans.
I will second.
All right, item FB1 has been moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Nusma. Councilmember Reed, you have the floor first.
Yes. I really appreciate Councilmember Kelly and the full Finance and Budget Committee for adopting this. A lot of us spent quite a bit of time making sure that this was workable. There is one amendment that I would like to make to this, which is to make this an ordinance rather than a resolution. And I think that aligns with the mission of everyone up here, as well as the folks in our public safety roles. And the reason I want to do this is because resolutions aren't legally binding. We use resolutions for street namings. We use resolutions to amend our rules. And as we just noted, we just broke one of our rules. There is an amendment that was passed by this body, and that amendment was not sent in writing to the council. I don't know if that amendment was ever sent in writing even to the chair, and we just blew through that rule, right? So resolutions have, and no one in the audience can ever file a lawsuit and say, oh, you didn't follow your rules. That's not a valid action. No court in this nation would take that up and see it as a serious issue. We passed a resolution to end structural racism. Has it ended? What are we doing to do that? We passed a resolution, and I'll direct this question to Council Cummings. We passed a resolution to fund our reparations program using cannabis sales tax dollars. If this year in the 2024 budget, we decided to allocate the cannabis sales tax dollars to another use, would we be violating the law, or would someone have legal standing?
Your consequences would be purely political.
It'd be purely political, but there are no legal consequences, or there's no standing for us to do that unless we have an ordinance that is in place. And so I would move that we take this resolution and we make it an ordinance rather than a resolution, because then it will actually be legally binding on future councils, and there would be consequences to not following the law rather than not following the wishful thinking of a council that happens to be here in 2023. So I move that we bring Resolution 45R23 back to council as an ordinance at our next meeting.
That was a motion, right?
That was a motion.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
And Councilmember Kelly, if you want this to be an actual policy, I would ask for you to second this.
So I'm not going to second. My understanding
All
from
right.
discussing this with our policy coordinator is that ultimately, really, will be binding.
Point of order. I just had our corporation counsel very clearly indicate to us that it is not legally binding. In fact, whether it be with our reparations program or anything, a resolution does not have a legally binding nature.
So Councilor Cummings had his light on. Did you still want to speak to this issue?
Not to this particular issue. The issue that I was going to speak to is the fact that bringing this back as an ordinance requires 2 readings, and it would need to not be done tonight. So with respect to whether something was legally binding, understand that the city council is a purely legislative.
I'm sorry, this might be a little out of order. The motion was not seconded. Is there a second? All right, there's no second. Please continue, Councilor Cummings.
With respect to whether something is legally binding, whether it's a resolution or an ordinance, understand that the city council is a purely legislative body. So in order to take most actions, you need to pass some sort of legislation. Resolutions and ordinances are that legislation. My understanding of this particular item, when it came from Finance and Budget, the Finance Department talked to me about this. It's an adoption of a policy. The city council is well within their purview to amend that policy year over year. Same thing with the resolution, and in reality, same thing with any ordinances. You can change the city code whenever you'd like to as well. I mean, we just did it with the portions of the zoning code. So, in terms of legal effect, Councilmember Reed is correct in our conversation. Like, no, it's not as if someone could sue us and say, you're not following this city code, because there is none, right? However, it is a sort of a promise to the residents to say you're going to follow this particular policy. And why I say that the consequences would be purely political.
And a point of order or point of information to Councilmember Kelly's point, an ordinance if a future council wanted to amend this, it would require 2 readings, unlike a resolution which could pop up on an agenda 48 hours before, so it could pop up on a Friday, and Monday a council's voting to amend this resolution that they're not even legally bound by. If it's not an ordinance, there's not a clear process that the public can ensure and use their political pressure on a future council to ensure that the law is followed. And in fact, if a future council chooses not to follow this policy, there would be no legal recourse that anyone would have to force a council to follow a mere resolution versus an ordinance. I would encourage us that if we are serious about this and we're not just doing this for show to say, to our voters in 2 years that we did something, and we want to do something that is lasting, this needs to be an ordinance and not a resolution. I move again that we bring this back and have 2 readings of this to make this an ordinance and rather than a resolution. Is there a second?
All right, it's been moved. Is there a second? All right, there's no second. Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Discussion of the last 5 minutes notwithstanding, I am very happy to support this resolution. I think this really does send a signal that this city council is very serious about our financial obligations, not only for the population of Evanston in 2023, but the population of Evanston in 2040 and beyond. So I'm happy to move forward with my support on this resolution. And in particular, I want to thank committee members for their efforts here, specifically Committee Chair David Livingston and Member Sherry Rikus for putting in some legwork on this policy. So thank you both. Looking forward to approving this.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. I am also very happy that we're finally taking the steps to ensure full funding of our police and fire pensions annually, on an annual basis from now on. This will have enormous financial benefits for Evanston residents and for the future of Evanston's public safety first responders. Hopefully I can applaud this council for moving forward and approving this resolution. I have full faith. The same way if a council didn't want to support this resolution in the future, it would be the same with an ordinance. They could change an ordinance too and vote to change that. So I'm satisfied with this as an ordinance. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other comments. You have an amendment?
I have a statement just like everyone else had.
You got 30
Has
seconds.
my time elapsed?
You have 30 seconds.
Did you measure my time?
Sir, you have 30 seconds. All right. Can we get a maybe roll call on this one? I'm seeing we may have somebody that might vote against it, I guess. So let's just do a quick roll call. Clerk Mendoza.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma. Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadagaris.
Aye.
I think that's the last item. We got roll call. Clap it up. Before we go to roll call, which I think is next, right? Is roll call next? Council Cummings, I don't know if you are around. I want to make sure I can't allow a rule to be violated on my watch as Mayor Pro Tem. This might be the only one, so this might get a little clunky, but I would like to deal with that if my colleagues would allow. We probably could have just suspended the rules, so that we wouldn't have to reduce it to writing. What was that item again?
My understanding is it was a P1.
Yeah.
My understanding is that you had paused while that amendment was being presented in writing.
One was provided to us by Councilmember Nguyen. I don't think the other one was reduced to writing. So what's the quickest way to deal with this?
There's no need to do anything. Point of order, because there's no consequence.
Please.
Councilmember Reed is actually correct.
I would like to deal with this as quickly as we can.
So the best way to deal with it is have the amendment presented in writing. I guess.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly is doing it now, so
Okay.
we'll
And
hold.
that way it's on the record that you have the amendment in writing. It'll be helpful to staff because we have to give it to the clerk to circulate for signature.
So we'll hold for a moment.
Maybe we could do call of the wards while that's happening.
We don't need to vote on it again, do we?
No, you can just do call the wards.
All right. Councilmember Kelly for call of the ward.
Point of order, a motion is not in order unless it's been reduced to writing. So if we're really going to follow the rule, we need to go back and vote on
Okay.
it again.
Could you, for call of the wards, could I write this while everyone else does call of the wards and then do my call of the wards last while you
Yeah,
write this?
sure.
Thank you.
Let's do that. Councilmember Harris.
Good evening. I just want to say that I attended a wonderful street naming in the 5th Ward, right across the street from me, for Janet Alexander Davis. A huge group of participants to honor someone. So I just wanted to say to her, again, congratulations. Street naming is one of the smallest things, or smallest things that we can do as a city. Second to none ward meeting will be August 13th, and a reminder will go out. Thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
4th Ward, August ward meeting will be Tuesday, August 1st at Robert Crown, and the next office hours are going to be Friday, August 11th, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Fountain Square.
And I have no report. Councilmember Reed.
Next 8th Ward meeting will be August 1st. We have a number of really great guest. We'll have, thus far confirmed, are Senator Mike Simmons as well as Representative Robin Gable. We were looking at two other of our local elected officials to attend, and so we're going to have a good meeting with cross-jurisdictional appeal. And so I invite folks out to that ward meeting. It will be held at
City Council, is that how I do it?
It will be held at the Levy Senior Center. I do want to note one other thing, which is the city of Evanston got a little bit bigger this weekend with some residents who reached out with concerns about a number of folks who are unhoused under the Howard Viaduct. And, you know, I received an email a while ago and determined, and it was under my impression that this portion of the city was actually part of Chicago. I reached out to my predecessor, who also confirmed, my predecessor who served for over 30 years in my role, who also confirmed that it was their belief that this portion of Howard Street was in the city of Chicago. Our police chief was under that impression. You know, a number of us up here may have been under that impression, and there are 15 to 20 unhoused people who have severe substance abuse issues, who have formed an encampment in the city of Evanston on Howard Street, and I am seeking to have this body, you know, through Human Services Committee and our next council meeting, put together a plan to address this. I know that none of us would find this acceptable in their wards, that there was a 20-person homelessness encampment that is reminiscent or akin to what's going on Skid Row in Los Angeles. And so I want to highlight that, and I also want to invite, we held a meeting today with various service providers. I think there are about 18 different cross jurisdictional and department partners on the call, and it's important for us as a city to step up and address this challenge, both for this encampment and encampments across the city that are maybe smaller, 1 person, 2 person, but we certainly have to address this, and I am looking forward to having that deeper discussion in the near future, hopefully at our Human Services meeting on August 21st.
Councilmember Hedekatis.
So Tuesday, August 1st, our health department is giving a 9th Ward rat walk. In the morning, we will take a tour of the neighborhood, opportunity to learn about what the city is doing, and also steps residents can take to eradicate infestation of rodents. And then we're going to have a 9th Ward hybrid meeting on Thursday the 10th at 6 o'clock, location to be determined, and that will go out in the newsletter and will be updated on the calendar.
Council Cummins before, I'm sorry, Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take a brief moment to make a statement regarding the issue that appears on the front page of the Tribune today with regard to the NU City Committee. As the council member that presides over this court-established NU City Committee, I have to say I was stunned to learn this weekend from 7th Ward residents, not from our staff, not from our mayor, not from corporate counsel, but instead from residents who uncovered important information through FOIA that our corporation counsel and deputy city attorney had filed a motion on May 1st to modify a nearly 20-year-old consent decree. I feel we all need to know who directed our corporation counsel to file this motion. I've requested this information several times now from our city manager. The FOIA emails that were shared with me reveal that the city's corporation counsel, while agreeing in emails with myself and attorney David Schoenfeld, who served on this committee since its inception, that the questions that NU might have regarding the purview of this committee would be addressed at a subsequent NU City Committee's subsequent meeting on June 14th. At the same time, these emails revealed that we were being circumvented and that that the Corporation Council is making arrangements with the NU attorney to file a motion to modify this longstanding consent decree. This was never shared with us. And by the way, nobody from NU showed up to that subsequent June 14th meeting, as was scheduled and previously agreed upon. Let's be very clear. This is NU's issue. It was NU, Northwestern University, at the April Northwestern City Committee meeting this year, not the three residents, not the city, who challenged the purview of this committee over the T1 parking lot zone that flanks Ryan Field along Ashland Avenue. Northwestern can file its own motion if it likes. The language in this consent decree is unambiguous, and it has been for nearly 20 years since it was enacted in 2004. Neither Northwestern University nor the city has had an issue with the language of the consent decree. Now, Northwestern is clearly interested in changing the decree to get this piece of property along Ashland Avenue removed from the consent decree and removed from discussions at the NU City Committee meetings because it's part of the Ryan Field proposal. No clarification or modification is needed in this decree. If Northwestern suddenly has questions about the wording of the consent decree, then Northwestern can file a motion. The committee has historically and intentionally, as described in the decree, discussed T1, T2, these are transitional zones, and U1 zones both inside and outside of the historic district. This decree was established in order to address issues between neighborhoods and Northwestern that may arise in these T1, T2, and U1 areas in order to avoid legal proceedings. Modifying the decree in the way that Northwestern wants it modifying by removing some neighborhoods that fall under the purview of this committee would disenfranchise and limit the city and its residents from collaborative discussions around land use and other matters as described in the 2004 decree. The motion that was submitted is an attempt to insert a limitation that is absent from the decree. In 2004, Northwestern had five attorneys negotiate this consent decree. If Northwestern needed other language, it certainly would have been added at that point. This motion that has been submitted benefits Northwestern and not the city. Filing this motion without informing the committee behind our backs undermines trust. I've asked the city manager to direct Corporation Council to withdraw this motion immediately. This entire matter was handled improperly and non-transparently. Thank you.
Chair, am I allowed to respond since I'm being questioned in a public meeting? Normally I wouldn't, but.
I will put that to my colleagues.
I think it's fair.
Okay. Council Cummings.
Just in brief, the consent decree calls for dispute resolution by the court and calls for that dispute to be brought to the court by either party. So since it was not brought by Northwestern and the parties were at an impasse, the city filed the motion. And we can discuss anything else after that in a closed session, but that's the reason why the motion was filed. It wasn't meant to try and circumvent anything or go behind anybody's back or be duplicitous. Parties were at an impasse. The consent decree says that the court handles disputes. So,
May I?
I mean, I would please allow us. We're going to discuss this evening, as we all know. Let's have the discussion, and then if you want to do this dance at the next call of the wars, we can do that. But I would ask that we allow. Let's get all the information in front of us before we do the back and forth. Council Cummings, I did have a question. So the amendments to P1 were sent. In your opinion, do we need to repeal what was done in order for this to be valid?
So, no. However, you as the chair recognized the motion. It was seconded. You had a roll call. It was voted on. To Councilmember Reed's point, in doing so, the rule was sort of already subverted. The motion was not necessarily his description of the motion being out of order is actually strictly in the purview of you as the chair. You, in my view, by recognizing the motion and calling for the second and calling for a vote, determined that the motion was in order. So now that we have a record of the amendment, you don't need to re-vote. However, you as the chair can certainly call for a re-vote if you felt that the motion was not in order.
I'll go with your opinion, Council Cummings. Thank you.
Point of order, point of information. Your desire was to follow the rule. That's why we even went through this whole thing here. So if you want to follow the rule, The motion was not properly in order, and Council Cummings, of course, is correct that you recognized it, but if you want to follow the rule, we should re-vote on the motion because it was not in order according to our rules.
Is it just a quick re-vote, or do we need to repeal, or what do we need to do?
You could just call the item again for a motion in a second.
Okay, let's do that.
But understand, this is for the amendment and then the ordinance as amended, so it'd be 2 votes.
Okay, well, can somebody make a motion? Councilmember Kelly, would you mind making a motion to the email that you sent?
Okay,
the
so
items
I
in the
guess
budget?
I'm making the motion again to hold those 2 items, the one related to the continuances with regard to the Land Use Commission and the other one with regard to expanding the TOD zone to a half a mile.
All right, it's been properly moved.
Or you're also making the motion on the underlying issue as well. Which,
First things first, let's get this done.
It's been properly moved and seconded by
there's no
Councilmember
underlying
Nguyen.
motion, point of order. Without the underlying motion, she's amending the air.
Councilmember Kelly.
I'm sorry, what?
Move
Okay,
P1. Yeah.
Or we could
I
just
move
skip all of this because it's just a rule and we can not do it.
Just move
so I'm
P1,
moving
Councilmember
P1.
Kelly, and then the amendments along with it. You did it? Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Kelly and seconded by Councilmember Harris. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, we have dealt with it. I will recognize Councilmember Nusma for a motion to go into executive session.
So did we vote the amendment?
Oh, do we need 2 votes?
We need 2
Okay,
votes.
so we've voted on the amendment and now the underlying.
No, we voted on,
We got to vote on the amendment first.
okay, so we voted on the amendment, correct?
And now the underlying motion.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, there was, right here.
So what was just passed was P1 unamended. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what just happened.
Everyone,
Okay, but then it has to be 2 different motions, one to move P1, one to amend.
Well, that's
That's
what we did
We moved
originally.
the
So the first
discussion.
motion was the amendment, and she was told that she needed to correct it and move P1. I just heard you call for that. She moved P1.
Oh, it needs to
Councilmember
be
Nguyen
amended
seconded,
after that then. you're
and
saying.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's try this again. Move P1, and then somebody needs to amend it once we've moved it, and then we vote on it, on the amendment, and
Correct.
then the underlying motion. Okay.
I move for the acceptance of P1.
All right, it's been properly moved. Is there a second? Second. All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember Nguyen.
now I'd like to.
Is there an
move-
amendment?
I'd like to now move the amendment
There we are.
to P1.
And can you explain it just one more time?
Which is to hold
for
the
good
items
measure?
related to the expansion of the T1 zone and with regard to continuances at the LUC.
Okay, that amendment has been properly moved and seconded. All those, any discussion? You want to do
Point
roll
of-
call?
Just to be safe for the file.
Councilmember Reed? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, now for the underlying motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right. And now, Councilmember Nusma with a motion. send
Pursuant
this
to
to
5
executive
Illinois
session.
compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the city council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel, collective bargaining, purchase or use of real property, litigation, establishment of reserves or settlement of claims, and minutes. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A, sections C1, C2, C5, C11, C12, and C21.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by everybody. Seconded by Councilmember Harris. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, we're gonna go into executive session at 7:08 p.m.